Yay Networks.
Welcome to Greg Louganis is Alive, the podcast that challenges what you think you know. I'm your host, Greg Louganis, and yes, I'm still alive. And I'm joined by my good friend and manager, Beth Zinman.
Hello, hello. I'm so glad you're alive, by the way. Just want to throw that in.
Thank you.
And I am so happy to be here with you today. Actually, truth be told, I'm pretty excited. I love peak performance. You know, as an entrepreneur, I feel like I can't get enough of that topic. There's so much of it on social media too. It's like everybody's an expert. But it's like confusing and overwhelming. Like you don't really know, like who really is the expert?
Right.
Yeah. But you know, until you and I started talking about it, I actually had no idea that I was, like performing also, just like in work every day. I just was clueless and was kind of, blown away, by some of your stories and the things that you would do to kind of like course correct in the moment. So like, I know you were, using some of these tools competing, but also, one of the things that really stood out for me was the one-man show that you did, which, by the way, bravo, holy cow. Like I could never. But yeah, that story I feel like is so interesting, like how you were able to kind of, go right into peak performance mode. Well, maybe not right in, but realize and go like between left and right brain and like the things you did to do that. I feel like the listeners would like that. Yeah. Tell them about it.
Yeah. That was a part of the reason why I reached out to Dawn, because that incident happened and I didn't understand. And so I was trying to break it down and try and figure it out. So what happened, I'm doing my one-man show, or I was trying to get off script and doing my homework in my imaginary work in each of the characters. For whatever reason, I didn't judge it, but each character had a different color to me. And I didn't know if it was cadence, it was an emotional state. I didn't know what the color was. I didn't judge it. So each character had a color, and it was the second night with an audience. And we had an audience. They did pay for their tickets, but it was also a part of the rehearsal too, that we could stop and start. And so I got through the first scene, the first character, the second scene, second character, I went up. I mean, it's an actor's nightmare, right? You don't know where you are. You don't know the next line, and I was thinking in my head, I turned to the audience and I said, I'm sorry, I'm lost. And I was like, what, I started walking around the stage thinking, oh my God, the script's backstage. And, but I'm the only one out here. I can't leave the stage. And I knew that the stage manager was working lights, so I couldn't call line. And then I thought of the color. And then that brought me back into the scene. And I shared that experience with Dawn. And he said, oh, Greg, you probably weren't down as long as you think you were. Because when I was thinking with my left brain, where's the script? The script's backstage. It's in my dressing room. The stage manager's working lights. I can't call it. That's logic. That's left brain. But when I thought of color, and it brought me back into the scene, that color is right brain. Performance is right brain. So it's almost like, and I know this very well in diving, you have to turn your brain off. You have to trust your training, trust your, that your body's going to know what to do and make adjustments. from there because that's all right brain. And so that's what was fascinating for my conversation with Don Greene about right brain versus left brain and how do you get there and the importance of it and the what it meant. So yeah, I'm really excited about the conversation today. So joining me today about peak performance and peak functioning is psychologist Dr. Don Greene. Don was the sports psychologist for the 1984 Olympic Games and the 1988 Olympic Games for the US and the 1986 World Championship team. He's taught his winning strategies to Olympic athletes, musicians at Juilliard and the Metropolitan Opera, as well as many more high-achieving people. Don has authored several books, his most recent book being Train Your Own Hero, a guide to reach peak functioning in 1 month or 21 days or 21 steps. We'll be back with Don Greene right after this break. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Going through life, oftentimes we need help in navigating where we're going. I remember when I was married, my husband and I were having some challenges and we needed help to navigate in such a way that was kind and loving. So I'm very grateful for therapy. Sometimes in life, we're faced with tough choices and the path forward isn't always clear. Whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. I love therapy because it puts a light maybe in a different perspective to something that I may not be seeing. So it's good to go into things with as much information as you can and lean on somebody to help guide you through some of these murky paths. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/GregPod today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/GREGPOD. Dr. Don Greene.
Hey, Greg, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining me. Now, okay, take us back. How did we meet and when?
We met in 1983 when you were getting ready for the Olympic trials in 84. That's when we met at the pool with Ron O'Brien in Mission Viejo. I was a sports psychologist. I just got out of school, and I just happened to have been a Division I diver.
Yeah, you started working with the team.
Yes.
Now, how did you know that I was using a lot of the tools that you teach, right?
Yes. A lot of the tools that I teach in your preparation, and certainly all the visualization that you did when people weren't really doing it, and you were way ahead of your time.
Yeah, it was funny because around that time, late 70s, early 80s, the sports psychologist started coming around the pool and saying, oh, have you tried visualization and mental imagery? And I'm like going, duh, doesn't everybody do that? Because I learned it when I was 3.
Exactly.
I shared that story
teacher,
with
your
you.
dance teacher, yes.
Yeah. And so that was, that was a tool that I used a lot. But what I found really, really fascinating, because we were around each other a lot. And like, what were some of the observations that you made? Because I know that you told me that you observed a lot of what I did.
Oh, yeah, very closely. You always came to practice prepared. You were always present, focused. You paid close attention what your coach Ron told you. And you were just, I never saw you not come in prepared or throw away dives. You never did throw away dives. Every dive you did in practice counted for you, just like it was in the finals. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because a lot of that was my own mentality. I would, a lot of divers balk. They're a little off balance on their takeoff and they stop. But I always viewed that as a challenge. I knew it wasn't going to be a great dive, but how good could I make it? So I remember Ron saying that he could probably count on one hand in the 10 years that he coached me, how many times I balked, because I thought of every bad takeoff as a potential, learning opportunity.
I never saw you balk ever. Even in practice, I never saw you balk. And yes, you want to get a great, perfect takeoff, but that's impossible. So after your hurdle, right, you come down on the end of the board or 3 inches back or a foot back, but you still have to go, because balking is death. I mean, you get a failed dive, basically. Yeah. So you always made the best of every situation, not just at the end of the board, but and all the stuff you went through, and you made the best of it.
The thing that was fascinating to me is, like, years later, and that was the example that I was giving, is I reached out to you about my one-man show. And I didn't understand right brain, left brain, all of that stuff. But you broke it down for me so I could understand why that worked. When I was thinking, oh my God, my script's backstage. I'm doing a one-man show, and I go up in the second scene, and I go, my script's backstage, but I can't leave the stage. I'm the only one out here, and the stage manager's working light, so I can't call line. And then I thought of the color, because each character had a different color. And I remember you telling me I probably wasn't down as long as I thought I was. It felt like forever, because it's the actor's nightmare. But you said that it probably wasn't that long, but you explained why that was. And could you share some of that insight of what you shared with me?
Oh, certainly. But it kind of goes back to left and right brain. And that, I think, will really help, because it's a very functional thing that most people don't understand. And it's not that complicated. And it's very functional, regardless of what activity you're choosing to do. It works very well. So let me explain the basics, okay? What we're talking about is the cerebral cortex, the gray matter, the thinking part of your brain, not the feeling part. The emotional part is in a different part of the brain. We're talking about the gray matter, okay? And the upper brain, the gray matter, or advanced thinking, is divided into two halves or two hemispheres, the left brain and the right brain. Each has a specific function, and each has its limitations. And it's really important to understand them in terms of yourself individually listening, and in terms of what you do. And I'm going to try to cover the options, because that's what Greg's bringing up, that he used his visualization, which is right brain, very well as a diver. But when you get to a one-man show, you're talking about lines and words and memory in the left brain, where it gets tricky. And Greg, like a lot of great athletes, is more right brain than left. And as a performing artist, as a dancer, he's very right brain. So let's go back to the basics. Left brain is where we think in words and numbers. Words and numbers. Lines in a show, memorization of lines in a way, and analyses, commentary, criticism, all this is left brain words, and some of those left brains can get in the way of what you're trying to do. If it's athletic, it can get more in the way because you don't need a lot of technical left brain thoughts when you're executing a physical skill like diving or football, any of those skills. You need to be more right brain than left. But if you're an engineer or an attorney, an accountant, you need to be more left brain than right with those fine details, with the numbers, with the bottom line, with all of those numbers and calculations and analyses. That's left brain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're an attorney, you need to be in that left brain. If you're an actor in a show, you need to be in and out of left brain.
Right. But even attorneys, have to be kind of right and left brain, because if they're, making a case and standing in front of the jury and trying to make an impact, then that, you're pulling on that emotion, right?
Well, amongst other things, okay? So the right brain is where we perceive, we don't think per se, we perceive in images, sounds, and physical sensations, kinesthetic, what it feels like, not emotional feelings, okay? So what you're talking about with an attorney is the exact thing where you need a combination of both. In other words, you need all the details, the evidence, the facts, if you will, in left brain. But when you're making your pitch, your speech to the jury, you want to paint pictures and colors. And if it's a murder, you want to talk about red blood. I mean, you want them to see that red blood, and that's an image that's in right brain. And also, how does that make you feel? But not an emotional. But this is what the really good attorneys do. They create a scene. So right brain is images, sounds, sensation, and also the sounds. If it's a gunshot thing or an automatic rifle, they're going to bring in the sounds of rat-a-tat-tat of an AR-15. Like many people haven't heard that, what it sounds like, but that has an impact on the jury. So I couldn't agree more, Greg. With an attorney, they still need to be both left and right brain.
Right, because you're creating, impact. You're creating that impact. Now, why would the average person care about peak functioning?
Any person should care about it because they're constantly doing things, whether it's driving or adding up their checkbook or having a meeting with either an employee or their boss. And you want to be using both sides of the brain. In other words, you want to go through the words. Let's say it's a meeting with your boss asking for a raise. You want to go through the left brain details when you got your last raise, when you're due, what the other people, all of these left brain numbers and the facts. Well, I haven't received a pay raise since so-and-so, and look at my efficiency reports, check those out. Here's what they say in words. And then again, switching to the right of painting the picture. Listen, don't you see me coming to work early a lot of days and staying late? Don't you see what I've been doing around here? Don't you hear the other employees talking about me and how happy they are with me? Those kind of things. And you want to rehearse this. You want to mentally rehearse this whole pitch before you go in, including contingency planning of what if he says this, and you work through that and mentally rehearse. If he says this, then I'll say that. What if he brings this up? Well, then I'll bring that up, and mentally rehearse it like you did for both your shows and your diving. So anything that gets you in the right brain, like a color is right brain, a sound is right brain, an image is right brain, it will pull you back into your subconscious where you do remember as you're as your conscious mind is freaking out and saying, what's that line? I can't, I got to, and you just
Right.
need to tap in to your right brain and colors, or however you did, as a way to get back in, which you did. And it always seems to take forever, but it goes pretty quickly if you use the right cue. And that's what the color was.
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating because I was having dinner with with this woman who was this concert pianist master, incredible. And we were talking about peak performance, and there was this one concerto that was really challenging, that was very difficult as an artist to perform. And she went to another master and said, "What's the secret? What's the secret of mastering this?" And the response, what she was told, spaghetti. It was like, how it looks, how it smells, how it tastes, how it makes you feel, all of those things. And I was like, oh my God, I so totally get that.
Out of your left brain thinking into your right brain, where it resides. Spaghetti, that's brilliant. That's exactly.
Yeah.
And texture is all right brain.
Right. So, when you shared with me how that right brain, left brain works, it just made so much sense, because a dive takes less than 3 seconds. And if you're in the execution of that said dive and you feel yourself a little off balance, then you can't be thinking, oh, I'm back on the board, anything like that, because that's left brain. So what I always thought was, change the tempo. I feel the sensation that I'm back on the board. I just change the tempo. We just changed the tempo of that. And that allowed me to make more instantaneous adjustments.
Tempo is right. Tempo is right brain, Greg.
Yeah.
Again,
so,
all the ways you got back into right brain without maybe knowing what you were doing, but it's brilliant.
And that's the reason why, the athletes that I work with, I always really encourage them to start a playlist, because you can tap into music. And everything has a rhythm. Everything has a rhythm. Comedy has a rhythm. Drama has a rhythm. A diving board has a rhythm.
Your dance background, all around rhythm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You grew up developing all those right brain skills without necessarily knowing what you're doing, but I guarantee you weren't doing well in math class.
Actually, you know what? Given certain circumstances, I actually excelled in math.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
I had difficulty in the social sciences and history. That was really, really much more challenging for me. But math, I actually did pretty good.
History's all left brain words. Dates. 1776. It's all left brain.
Yeah.
Death.
Oh, that was a struggle for me.
Yeah. So, this is why.
Okay, so how can the average person utilize? How is this advantageous to to learn these things?
Right. Well, if you're doing left brain things, you need to at least start in left brain. Okay. If you're doing right brain things, you need to start in right brain. But there needs to be a switch, and somehow switch over to account for the other side. The first is people have a normal predisposition generally to left brain, and somehow their careers, attorneys, accountants, mathematicians, scientists tend to go there and not emphasize the right brain. I just spoke to my brother yesterday. You met him a long time ago in Mission Viejo. He's a surgeon. He's retired now. And we talked about him being mostly left brain, the technical aspects of surgery. And I asked him about right brain skills, like if he ever did any drawing, no. Music, no. Dance, certainly not. He's a surgeon. That's what he does. Since he's retired, he continues to offer volunteer work in the Caribbean and all that. But I asked him about creative things, what he had done creatively, which is right brain. And he basically said nothing. And I asked him if he read books on creativity, like I'm a big fan of like The Artist's Way. And he said, I've never heard of that. I've not, visuals, the creative aspect, the visualization aspect. No, he didn't picture another way to do surgery or another way to do it's just stay within the left brain rules and do it, and don't get creative with the surgery, please. So it was really illuminating to me because he's pure left brain, almost pure left brain, and he stays there. And when I brought up, thoughts of creativity, there's a book called Drawing with the Right Side of the Brain. And it's absolutely brilliant for left brainers who claim they can't draw. And with the left brain, you can't draw. And it teaches people how to trust their right brain. And I've seen people go through this, and the drawings that come out look almost professional. 3 months ago, they said they couldn't draw at all. So again, the right side for a lot of people is very untapped. Even retired people have take up the piano or painting lessons or art or something, and they just kind of get stuck in their left brain, following the news and the stock reports and the S&P, and it's a shame. It's just such a rich environment.
Okay, so what are the benefits? I mean, I can see some as far as right brain creativity, seeing things a little in a different way,
Yes.
which is great for problem solving, and really happiness and joy.
People feel better when they're in a happier place. But if you ask people in general what's on their mind, a lot of it is left brain worries and finances and imagining the worst. If this happens, what if my insurance? And that tends to create more problems and unhappiness versus imagining good times in your life, happy times in your life. And very few people do that.
Yeah, what comes to my mind is your inner critic. Your inner critic is just so left brain, and we're judging, and we're judging ourselves and others, and that we get so down on ourselves. Whereas moving over to your right brain is more creativity and expression and connection, to be, a part of the solution rather than being bogged down by the problems.
Well, that's exactly it, because the left brain is the part in words that criticizes, complains, finds faults, judging, because those are the worst things your left brain can do, and it does damage. And if you don't, it happens somewhat unconsciously, subconsciously. You don't realize it's going on, but it's going on a lot. And you realize maybe why you're in a bad mood, and you've been thinking about your worries, your complaints, your financial problems, interpersonal problems, problems with your car, whatever it is. And it's bringing you down. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. And if you're interacting with somebody, you won't be fully present because your mind will be drifting off in the left brain and trying to work out those problems. If you're an athlete, it's really can cause problems, especially judgment. Judgment is one of the worst things you can do. And most people, especially perfectionists, are highly judgmental and spend a lot of time in that left brain perfectionism, judgmental. And I ask my performing artists and my athletes to realize the damage they're doing and shift to right brain and discernment, not judgment, discernment, because there's, like in diving, there's no perfect dive. I mean, there's just not, even for Greg Louganis, there's no perfect dive. And you can find technical problems. You know, I was a little bit back on the board. I came out a little bit early. I didn't line it up right, or just say, okay, I was a little bit over, or I came out a little bit early, rather than, oh, that sucked. That sucked. That was horrible.
Right.
And that's the important discipline, is to stop the judgment, and also stop the judgment of other people, because we're just, a lot of us are judgment machines, and then we judge ourselves, and often harshly, really tough on ourselves. I ask people to write out the things they're saying to themselves, you know, the critical stuff. And I say, would you say that to a good friend or a student? No. I reserve that treatment for yourself, and stop it. It's a bad habit. You know, don't ignore your mistakes, but please don't obsess on them, because the more you obsess on the mistakes, the more you're setting yourself up to make them again. That's how it works.
The one thing in your book, Train Your Own Hero, that I really appreciated you bringing up is talking to your shadow. You know, that shadow side of, you know, and when you, what triggered that thought to me was when you said being present. You know, being present in that moment. How often we allow that shadow to creep in, that judgment, that, you know, that stuff to derail us.
Exactly.
Yeah, to derail us from success.
Let me explain quickly. This has come from Carl Jung, Jung, a Swiss psychotherapist, much better than Freud. And he said, basically, we have two major parts of our personality: our persona, which is our public face, the happy face, everything's good, and our shadow, which is behind it, which is the critical side, saying, no, this isn't good, and the negative side. And it's in all of us. Shakespeare said, this darkness in me is mine. We all have a dark side, and it can come out at tough times. And the first step is to realize that none of us are perfect. We all have imperfections in our personalities, and the critic, the shadow, is always there to point out our deficits and our worst parts. And it's one of the worst parts of our personality, and it's real. And we need to reason with it and say, come on, help me out here. I'm trying to do my best, and stop with the criticism. I'm doing my best. I don't need the criticism, and reason with it, and come to terms with it. And that's a large part of my book, is coming to terms with your shadow, because your shadow can be very critical, but it's also very creative, and it also doesn't like to overthink, and it's also very talented.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was really struck by our conversations, is that in that shadow, we're so terrified of looking at that, taking a look at that, and investigating that. You know, people are so terrified of it, but that is actually where so much creativity can be.
And that's what my book, Train Your Own Hero, goes through, that once you can sit down with your shadow, understand its complaints and early childhood trauma. That's where the shadow originates, in early childhood trauma, whether that's being bullied, or, you know, a teacher finding criticism with you, or being abandoned, or a parent abusing you. That's when the shadow starts to form.
Being adopted, you know, being in foster care. You know, it's like you don't realize the impact that has, and the effect, you know, because it kind of lives bubbling right under the surface, because we don't want to expose that.
And we're afraid of it, because there's a lot of unpleasant memories that we don't want to live again. And I'm learning that just about everybody's had childhood early trauma, and that's when the shadow starts. with a parent or something in school or a teacher or bully, and because it's unpleasant, we tend to not want to deal with it and push it down and suppress it, and it gets resentful of that, and you're ignoring me, and pay attention to me like a kid. Just pay attention to me. And people don't want to because it's ugly and brings up bad memories. But if you're willing to just sit down and go through some of the terrible stuff and acknowledge that your shadow went through bad stuff, then it starts being satisfied that you're paying attention to it, taking it as real. And now, once you get past the tough stuff, then it starts getting into neutral, where it stops opposing your best, and then it gets into what's called the golden shadow, which it wants to share good things with you, and that's where the creativity comes in, because the shadow is the source of creativity. Absolutely. You look at just about any brilliant artist, they've got some darkness in them that they've dealt with and somehow got past and expressed in their art, whether it's poetry, paintings, music. Absolutely. Billy Joel wrote a song about this called The Stranger, because Billy Joel went through some tough stuff. And if you listen to the song on YouTube called The Stranger, he's talking about this other side of us that we don't fully understand and can cause problems unless we do.
Yeah, and the creativity of that, because I remember when we were working and, kind of revealing, that shadow side of, my shadow, he's cheeky and has an incredible sense of humor, and and there's all these other elements that is really very surprising, when you're uncovering all of that stuff.
That's exactly it, because it's great stuff that's been pushed down and hidden under the bad parts of the shadow, just wanting to be heard about its complaints. That's exactly it. And once you open that up, oh my God, it leads all sorts of creative pursuits and writing, and just opens up a wonderful Pandora's box of hidden talents and creativity. That's why I'm such a big fan of it. But it's tough work. Most people don't want to even think about their shadow, let alone that it's part of them. And if you look at it, it's caused problems in the past with a lot of athletes that I work with, professionals, that like golfers, hit a shot like, what was that? I haven't hit a shot like that since I was in high school. Or musicians, missing a note that they could eat. What was that? And that was the shadow wanting to get your attention, saying, hey, I'm here, pay attention to me.
Yeah.
And it causes unforced errors. That's what my book is about. The shadow is a source of unforced errors that most people don't even understand. Like, what was going on there? It's the shadow.
Yeah, and it's all about integration.
Oh, yes.
Integrating those things, embracing the dark, the light, all of those things, and
the imperfections, the less than perfect, and embracing them, which is called integration. And that's this whole process that you don't try to get rid of the shadow. You can't, or ignore it. You integrate it as a wonderful part of you that has talents and training. And that's when you become your whole self. And that's when you become your whole self. You incorporate all these different parts of you into what you do.
This has been amazing. Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been wonderful, and sharing this for the audience of, these ideas of right brain, left brain, of addressing our shadow, letting our shadow be seen and acknowledged, and embracing that and integrating, train your own hero. How now you have train your own hero, but how else can people stay in touch with you and see what you're up to?
Well, they can go on my website, trainyourownhero.com, and I have webinars. In fact, I've got a couple that I did a while ago posted on there free about the shadow. and just what we were talking about, how it develops, what it does, and it's illuminating for most people. They don't understand it, but hopefully you see how functional it is, and especially with you, because you've lived in all these worlds, these different arenas of diving and dance and acting and one-person show and creativity. I mean, you are a personification of combining all these parts into your whole and making it work and continue to work.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Dawn, for joining me. And this was incredible.
I enjoyed it, as always.
Yeah, thank you. So this is Greg Louganis is Alive, a podcast that questions all the things that you think you know. So tap like, subscribe, so you don't miss an episode, and you can keep up with us. Okay? Thank you for joining us, and namaste.
Yay Networks.